This residential estate is in the heart of the Surrey commuter belt. It's typical of the success, wealth and show of the modern age. And in the middle of it is this tower, which is typical of the success, wealth and show of the Tudor period. But it's also the tip of an archaeological iceberg, because if you look at this really old drawing, you can see that the tower is the gateway to a lavish palace, which was once owned by some of the wealthiest men in the country, the Bishops of Winchester. It's a palace that was once so admired that King Henry VIII literally stole one of the buildings. So how much of it survives under these beautifully manicured lawns? And how many of these gardens would it have once covered? The palace has been lost for over 300 years. We've got just 3 days to find it.
Well, this plan of 1606 shows the gatehouse as it survives, and then it looks like a socking great castle.
And what's this over here?
Well, I don't know what that is. It might be a chapel, but it looks 3 stories and a stair turret could be guest lodgings. That's all to play for, that one.
Jonathan thinks that this early plan might just illustrate the late medieval layout of the palace in Waynflete's time. It certainly shows Penny's tower with a courtyard surrounded by loads of buildings, great targets for our geophiz in Penny's back garden. It's so frustrating. On day one, we just have to wait until they've geophized.
Well, no, I've got a trench for you.
Get digging.
Yes, exactly.
Well, let's do that, if you don't mind.
Please do.
If you could
Be my guest.
give us permission.
This is a zonking great building, isn't it?
Isn't it? Now, what's a bishop doing building a great tower during the Wars of the Roses?
Hang on, do you actually live in this?
Yes.
How many rooms have you got?
5 bedrooms.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a nice house. It's
Yeah,
a very
yeah.
pleasant, comfortable place, but was it always comfortable? That's my question. Got a hole for a musket at the top, and then maybe arrows underneath. I mean, is this a bishop who's afraid for some reason? So if you've got arrow slits around the corner, and the 1606 map shows a big wall.
So this would be coming off at this angle, yeah?
Pretty much down there. What's that wall doing there? It could be a thick wall with a parapet, like a curtain wall of a castle.
You've got doorways coming out of this wall here in this direction anyway, so there must have been a range of buildings across here. Yeah, so I think we should put a trench somewhere across this range here, and then we're likely to pick up not only the curtain wall, but the walls of this range as well.
Yes.
Now think about this, because I think they're implying that they trash not only your back garden, but your front garden as well.
That's fine by me. Go for it. Get digging.
Go for it. Get digging.
We're
Music
off.
to our ears. So we're going to dig our first trench in Penny's front garden to see whether Waynflete built a large defensive wall around his palace. Penny wants trenches, so no messing around, and digging starts straight away. William Waynflete was one of the most powerful men in the 15th century. As Bishop of Winchester and Lord Chancellor, he owned 240 properties. But our search for his Esher Palace won't be easy. The Bishops of Winchester lived here from the 12th century, and they, and any of its other owners, who include Henry VIII, Cardinal Wolsey, and Francis Drake's family, could have built on the site. Although Waynflete's tower still survives, the rest of the palace was knocked down at the end of the 17th century, and the area's been landscaped on several occasions. All these phases complicate our search, but they're not the immediate problem for Phil.
Look, we've got a main sewer coming here through where those bricks are to that manhole, and then at the same time we've got the canopy of the trees. We can't dig anywhere underneath there. None of this is possible. We really can't be digging any further than that down to the canopy over there, which is where your buildings are going to be.
But we can survey the whole area. We can survey right up to the trees, so we can hopefully give you a plan.
Tree roots might be a problem, but not all our clues are below ground. Since we want to discover more about the palace Waynflete built, what better place to start than the tower itself? What is it that's so innovative about this building?
Well, in the 15th century, we'd been at war with France. Now, we'd had a lot of experience of our generals going over to northern France and Flanders and seeing brick buildings. But it's exactly at this period, with that influence from the continent, that people like Waynflete start building simply with bricks. There's one here. Example, Farnham is just up the road.
Yeah.
And he's got exactly the same approach to building completely with brick.
Is all of this building Waynflete?
Well, it's a jigsaw puzzle, Tony, because we've got 300 years of occupation here. Later improvements often have little bits of classical detail that these architects are so used to they can't imagine doing without. That's a Greek key motif, and that is called the Vitruvian scroll. It's a wave motif.
Penny's really keen that Wainfleet should be recognised as this really innovative architect. How do we work out which bits were him and which bits were tacked on by someone later?
I suppose brick sizes are useful, aren't they? We can have a look and see whether those bits with the diaper that are obviously Wainfleet's are the same size as some of these finicky bits.
In the front garden, where we're trying to find out if there was a defensive wall, Jonathan and Matt have hit on archaeology.
Fine mortar.
That's what was 18th century.
Might well be 18th century, actually. Yeah, I'd be looking for bigger chunks of chalk knocked together with some little dark flecks.
Yeah.
So my guess would be you're talking about 18th century demolition.
Yeah.
We haven't found the wall yet, but Stuart's had a look at the early plan and he's convinced it holds the key to Wainfleet's palace.
This map, which is produced by Ralph Treswell, is a spectacularly informative map.
Yes, I've seen a blow-up of just that tiny space.
Yeah, it includes a phenomenal amount of detail in the buildings, and it's actually a measured survey. Although the buildings are drawn as if they're a bird's eye view, the way this was made was to make a plan and then draw the buildings on afterwards.
It must be one of the very first measured maps then.
It is. I think there are a lot of clues on this map. I mean, this is a real gem to work with.
So this early plan is a great starting point to search for Wainfleet's palace. It shows Penny's Tower as the gateway to the complex, with a possible defensive wall coming off the side. The mysterious chapel lies to the south. There's a keep in the next door garden, and a large building, possibly a great hall, immediately in front of the gatehouse. So Phil and the diggers begin to open a trench in the back garden in order to test John's geophys and tie down the buildings.
Oh, look, no, it's got the mortar. It's got the mortar. Look, it's got the mortar on it. But that's the edge of it. There's the. So that's one corner of it. Now's the rest of it. Nice so.
After a day and a half in Penny's front garden, Matt might finally have made a breakthrough in the wall trench.
Hold it there for a second, Ian. Think. There we go. Oh, without a doubt. Ah, and there's a course down there as well. That's the other side there.
Brilliant.
Definitely. So we've got one bit there and one part of the wall there. So what am I standing on here?
Matt seems to have hit a brick wall in more ways than one. While in the neighbouring garden, things are just getting started, as Kerry opens a trench to search for the chapel-y structure. And in Penny's back garden, Rakshas opened another trench based on John's geophys results, which showed a large building, possibly a great hall. Now, Phil's cleaned up the walls in his trench. He's pretty sure he's found part of it.
If this is the Great Hall coming along like this, geophysics says that it doesn't run the other side of the path.
Right.
So if this is the corner of the hall, I'd like to resolve whether or not it turns this way.
Yeah.
If it's absent from there, we know that the hall has got to be this way and not that way. Or in other words, whether we got the front corner or a back corner. Good.
Very good.
Keen to solve this puzzle, Phil and Jonathan want to know whether Rakshas trench holds any clues.
Raksha.
Oh, hello.
How you doing on?
Doing very well, actually. We've got this wall running down here, and it's composed of the similar material that Phil has in his trench. We have something coming up this side, which is composed of flint and mortar. I can't really see what's going on because I think we need to extend that way. And then we have this floor running through here, and I'm wondering whether it's a corridor or not.
Is there any chance that you're walking on a floor that's made up of bits of rubble and cement or mortar that would have had tile on the top of it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
10. About 10 metres.
Well, that's 30 foot, isn't it? It's just over 30 foot. So that's exactly right for a great hall. Yeah, absolutely. Bang on typical. Nice.
So we've found the Great Hall, which ties in perfectly with our plan, and it must have been part of Wainfleet's palace. The hall's made of stone, so would have been built earlier than the brick gatehouse. We've also located a wall in the front garden. It's made of brick, but is it Wainfleet?
Hey, Jonathan, come and look at this lot.
Mate, I can have a nose.
Yeah, come in.
This is all get very, very complicated now, look.
You've got two walls going on.
We've got the first wall here.
Yeah.
It's lovely flat face down to there, and from there downwards is the slightly more messy foundation. And also appears there's been a drain cut through it there. We carried on back, there's rubble. So either the wall has collapsed down here, like that, or it could be the beginning of a culvert which came up like that. And then we hit another wall, or in fact it's more of a large plinth with a kind of triangular feature on top, which seems to have a couple of bricks heading off in that direction.
That 1912 map didn't show two walls here, did it?
Not at all, it showed one wall marked coming straight up this way. Quite a wide wall, but...
And this is that wall, do you think, that's shown in 1912?
It seems to be on the right alignment, a little bit off.
So does that mean there's a passageway between these two walls then?
Well, there doesn't seem to be any floor in between these two
Right.
walls. They're also not quite aligned together,
Yeah.
so they could be different phases as well.
Beginning of day 3 here in Penny's back garden in Esher, where we were looking for Esher Palace, except now we think that at least some of the time it had a much more defensive function, maybe something more like Esher Castle. And this being day 3, some of our lads have been here since 7 o'clock this morning because they think that in these trees somewhere there might be a really important, significant trench. Actually, it's more like a badger in here, I think. They reckon, thank you, that there could be the keep in there. Although yesterday you said that the majority of the keep was in the next garden, so why is this so important?
Yeah, that's right, the majority of the keep is in the next garden. It's just possible that this strip down here might be within Penny's garden, but the majority is in the other garden.
There's no doubt about it. Look, that's the survey next door. You can see the keep quite clearly. This dotted line is the avenue of trees behind us, and the keep extends across here.
So you haven't been able to geophys behind the trees?
No, but it extends round like that.
So could these red bits actually be the tip of the keep?
Yeah, and we're digging in here.
It's looking good.
Yeah.
We've made loads of progress. There's a great hall opposite Penny's gatehouse. We've found a wall, though we're not sure how it fits into Wainfleet's grand scheme. And now we've got the chance to discover and date a whole castle keep. The site's now a hive of activity. Bridge is busily digging in our Chapelly trench, and the diggers continue their early morning efforts on the keep trench. I'm keen to see how the Great Hall fits together in Penny's back garden, so Jonathan's giving me a guided tour.
Wraxall is on the other side,
Yeah.
picking up on the geophysics. It was very clear. And there is another piece of ironstone masonry. That's the other side of the hall.
So what's the logic of that? Why is it here like this?
Well, you see, nothing should impede the relationship of the gatehouse to the hall because you need to be guided through to the entrance to the whole complex.
OK, so I come through the gatehouse.
Yeah, and the hall is the assembly space. So
Yeah.
come with me, you're now walking through the porch and you've gone through Wraxall's wall, you're into the hall now. There's the kitchens over there, they're knocking up dinner for you. This is where you as a bishop, Bishop Tony, have a court, you have retainers, you have staff. This is basically your staff canteen and big reception space. It's an all-in-one, multifunctional extravaganza.
So I come in here?
Yeah, so through the timber screen, and Aubrey describes a roof here with angels holding up shields. Fabulous vision and bits of stained glass. So from the south, the stained glass will shine through on a platform at the far end where the bishop sits, presiding over everyone. Now, when he's finished his meal, he's going to go up his stairs. Off he goes. There's bishop, warmth, bed, comfort. Far end, there's the kitchen's noise, dirt, smell, danger. The hall separates everything out into servant's end and posh.
Well, that's that bit sorted out. Let's go on to the next
Let's have a
bit
look.
now. So not only have we identified the Great Hall, but thanks to documents, we've got an idea what it looked like inside. Helen's keen to find out what else the documents can tell us.
John, now we've got that dendro date, 1462 to 1472 for the building of the gatehouse. Is there anything in the pipe rolls that would help us narrow down that date even further?
There was a word I couldn't read, and I've read it now.
What is
translated it? It's Zabili. That means sable. And you think, well, that's a fur, you know, for a gown or decorating a hood. But in fact, I discovered from the Wolsey building accounts that he had sables, and they were ropes, and they were special ropes for gins, that's the engines, and cranes, the heavy-duty lifting equipment of late medieval, early modern building sites.
So there's some major building project going on?
In 1462-3, and obviously a rope had snapped, and so they had to replace it.
So it occurs in those repair accounts. So is that enough of a smoking gun?
It's highly suggestive.
Highly suggestive. That's fantastic.
We've now got the evidence which proves Waynflete commissioned major works around 1462. We know he built the gatehouse opposite a medieval Great Hall, and I'm spurred on to find out whether that wall and the keep were part of his grand design.
So, we reckon that if this is the keep, the key identification thing is whether or not this wall carries straight on or whether it splays out into the turret. And I reckon that we are at just about a point to know whether or not that's true or not.
Fantastic.
Because you see, look, we've got a wall coming along there, and it's going straight there. Oh, look.
Oh, amazing! That's just brilliant. So what would have been in that turret? Another staircase, or?
I don't know. What have you got? What have you got in your? What have you got in your turrets? You have worked with him as long as we have. You'd know this was just a mere fluke.
I'll just ignore that. You get on with your toys.
Things are also shaping up nicely in the wall trench.
Have you sorted this yet, you chaps?
There's been a breakthrough, Mick.
Oh, I like breakthroughs, that's good.
We have got, can you see down here? See the brick floor here, which joins up this wall and this wall.
Ah.
So they were definitely contemporary.
Right. So does that help us, Jonathan, in explaining what it is?
It does. If you're standing in what's a passageway,
Yeah.
that makes sense. And this is a pier there, so that a column of brickwork rose from it.
Right.
This ties in exactly with what John Aubrey shows in his 1670s survey of this being a whole arcaded wall with a terrace on top.
Well, that all makes a lot more sense now.
Doesn't it? So we'd walk out there onto the top level of a big arched wall, maybe with crenellations on the top, and it does feel like something of a castle defence, doesn't it?
Yeah. That's brilliant, that is. You know, you imagine coming through the big brick gatehouse into a courtyard, and no sooner have you got past that that's impressive, you get into a courtyard out here, and there in front of you is an even bigger brick tower.
When you come through the gatehouse that he's built, he has a two-storey wall with a terrace on the top. He's got his own private link between the gatehouse and his lodgings, because that's what this is all about. It's smart lodgings in a place that looks like a defensible castle.
What's the relationship of this keep with the Great Hall? Does he live in both of them, or does he live in one of them?
I think it depends on whether he's visiting here as a stopping-off route, on his way to London, or whether he's having visitors here, because if he needs to entertain, then he's going to be in the hall and retreat to the lodging. If he's on his own, he may as well just walk through the gatehouse and lock himself in his room.
The hall's a big display place, isn't it? Where, you know, you have feasting, you show off how wealthy you are, how much food you've got, and so on. He's not going to do that if he's just going to come in for a pint and a sandwich on the way on the journey.
Well, it's the perfect end to our 3 days in Esher. A major brick-built palace that had been lost for 300 years. He wanted Waynflete's reputation restored. Seems like he's kind of done it himself, doesn't it? Got this massive gatehouse, put a defensive wall, a curtain wall, all the way around it. Lots of buildings here for food preparation, kitchen, great hall dominating the middle of this area, and right over there, even bigger than the gatehouse, a keep, and virtually all of the buildings in your garden.
Time Team is 100% independent and funded by our incredible fans. Want us to make more episodes? Joining Patreon gives you access to exclusive interviews, 3D models, masterclasses, and more. And you get to have your say in the process as we develop new sites.
This has to be one of the most spectacular locations we've ever been to on Time Team. This is Knock Dhu, a magnificent promontory overlooking the coast of County Antrim, Northern Ireland. I can hardly see my hand in front of my face at the moment, and the wind's practically blowing me off the hill. But once the fog lifts, you'll see spectacular views of the Mull of Kintyre behind me and the coast of Scotland way over there. Better still, you'll see this, one of the most impressive and mysterious prehistoric monuments in the whole of Ireland. We're on a remote site here, 20 miles north of Belfast. Knock Dhu is a vast headland that towers over the Antrim coast. And on its summit is this, a giant prehistoric earthwork of man-made banks and ditches. But it's never been excavated before, so no one knows what it was for, who built it, or when. Finding out is going to be an enormous challenge. For a start, it takes us half an hour by tractor just to get up here. And once on top, you're battered by the fierce winds and rain. It's late morning on day one, and we're opening our first trench here. A 10-metre-long slice right across the ditch and bank system of our prehistoric earthwork. We're looking for evidence of how it was constructed, and finds like bits of pottery. Basically anything that might hint at what this earthwork was for and why people went to the trouble of building it here in the first place. Both of which at the moment are a complete mystery. But there could be an important clue down in the valley below. This is where you were looking for some kind of Bronze Age roundhouse, isn't it? How have you got on?
We've got it, Tony. I mean, I can't be absolutely certain that it's Bronze Age, but we've certainly got the roundhouse. Look, we've got this tumble of stones. They spreads round in a big arc coming round here in this quadrant of the roundhouse. We think this is probably where the wall has actually fallen down the slope. So we've got our roundhouse. And crucially, we've got some finds. Look at that lot. That is all worked flint.
Oh, there's a lot of these, isn't there?
There must be at least 10 or 20 pieces there, and we've actually got one here that's been retouched into a tool. Look, somebody's chipped off that flint there and retouched that into a little scraper. And all this worked flint is coming from the floor of the hut.
Great, our first tool. So we think we've got evidence of people living here. We think we know what they did with their dead. But who were they, and when were they around? We need dating evidence. Beginning of day two here at Knock Dhu in Northern Ireland. As you can see, it's been raining all night and the trenches have filled up with water. The 4x4s can't get up here anymore. Look at the state of that trench there. The tractor got stuck in the mud. We've all had to walk up half a mile of this, carrying our equipment before we can even start. But it's been all worthwhile, so the archaeologists tell me, because we found this incredible system of prehistoric defensive ditches. Not only that, we've also got a prehistoric roundhouse, complete with evidence of the people who lived in it. Although I keep getting confused, Francis, because I think of this as the whole roundhouse, but in fact, it's only a quarter of it, isn't it?
Yes, you can see the walls going on the outside there, round back behind us, right round there, and then that's the doorway.
What's the significance of this find for you?
Well, what's really exciting about it is this is a proper house. This is a permanent dwelling for people. And we've got the debris they left behind them on the floor in the form of flints.
What do we do with it now?
Well, we've got to define those walls, and then I think we'll extend in this direction to see how it's been set back into the hillside.
What else are we going to do? What are your other targets?
Well, do you remember yesterday, at the end of the day, we discovered this barrow, this cairn on the other side of the hill? Now, I think that is crucially important.
So does that mean there might be a burial in it?
I hope so, Tony. I mean, the radar looked very much like there was one. And of course, that's important because, OK, we've got the living, but we've also got the dead. We've got their ancestors. So that adds to the importance of this place.
We're really starting to be able to tell the story of this place, aren't we?
Oh, this place is beginning to hum, yeah.
Except that after last night's torrential rain, it's also turned into a quagmire. It's causing us one or two minor technical problems. Unless we want to excavate in snorkels and flippers, first we're going to have to bail out the trenches. It's 10:45 on day two, and we're opening a third trench here to excavate the mound with a dip underneath it that we picked up on the radar yesterday. If this is a stone-lined grave, it'll give us a pretty accurate date for this part of the site.
as I understand it, Raksha, if these are post holes, we could be looking at a palisade that's made up of like one large one and then lots of little, almost stake-like post holes in between.
Back in Trench 1, there's been a breakthrough. We found the first evidence that the earthwork was fortified.
This looks pretty convincing. This is a huge one here. You've got one at the top.
Yeah.
And then we've got lots of kind of smaller tentative ones, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, this could be one here.
A bit further down.
This could be one here. And then an interesting one down here, which at the moment, actually, can you see that orange there? That could be some burned clay. And there's actually charcoal fleck in it. And from past studies on these things, they're often a good indicator for actual post holes.
These post holes could have been used for the sharpened wooden stakes of a palisade built on top of the earthwork to defend whatever was up here. And there's now more evidence for that in Trench 3, because what we thought was a grave for the dead actually turns out to be a place for the living.
What it looks like we have is that looks to be a foundation trench associated with a roundhouse.
Ah, yeah, you can see there is this dark stripe across there, and they're lovely sort of packing stones really rammed in there to make a good foundation.
Yeah. So the roundhouse sort of goes up slope here, and I believe there are another two potential roundhouses just a bit further up.
But the fact is that if you open up this little area and you inadvertently stumble upon a roundhouse, you don't know it's here. I mean, if we don't know that this one's here, how many more roundhouses were there? The whole hillside could be smothered in roundhouses.
We've now confirmed not one but two roundhouses that Phil believes could be part of a much bigger settlement. So we're now convinced this earthwork was built to protect the people living on the promontory behind it. And we think they may have been rather special, because a fort like this was a clear display of their power and wealth to the outside world. And it was a world that Knockdhu was surprisingly close to, because the prehistoric people living here didn't confine themselves to the Antrim coast. They also had links with communities from across the Irish Sea, shown by these intriguing tools from local museums.
There's plenty of evidence that this high-quality Antrim flint was actually travelling across the sea to Scotland.
How do we know that?
Ah, well, there's things like this fantastic hoard that was found in 1990 by a schoolboy, and it's got 5 ready-to-use flint axe heads.
And where were they found?
They're found at Campbelltown here, you see, just
in
across...
Scotland?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where are these ones from?
Well, now that's another part of the story. So it wasn't just stuff going from Ireland to Britain. You get stuff coming back from Britain to Ireland. So these two are from Great Langdale in the Lake District. Again, it's a site where they were knocking out tens of thousands of these things.
So these ones here, these started out in the Lake District and they were found here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's, nearly 100 have been found in Ireland now.
If trading was going on, do you think there'd also have been what you might call cultural exchanges, ideas crossing and people crossing?
Absolutely, yeah, they were intermarrying, they were related to each other. We know this because they were using the same kind of pottery, they were sharing designs, and also the tombs that they were building, these big megalithic tombs, they were exactly the same on either side of the channel.
It's funny, isn't it? Because when you climb to the top of that hill, you imagine that prehistoric community was really isolated, but you're saying that it's actually got connections with places hundreds of miles away.
Absolutely, yeah.
Back on site, our hamlet has become a village, but Stuart's got a puzzle. He thinks he's now found a staggering 14 roundhouses, but they're not all the same.
You see, they're all separated, they're kind of detached.
So this might have a different function?
Well, I still think it's probably a house, but it may even be a different chronological date to that group over there. And this one, as well as the big bank round it, it's also got a raised interior, which makes this one very different to all the others. So it'd be worth putting in a trench in here just to see what this one is.
And provided they don't get lost in the fog, we might find someone to dig it, because this is turning into a battle with the elements. The road leading up here is now a sea of mud, and unfortunately our tractor can't swim. There's only one thing for it: we'll have to excavate it. It's mid-afternoon, day 2. It's getting absolutely ridiculous. I left the tent, which I think is over there, about 7 minutes ago, looking for Phil's trench. I can't find it. I've passed 2 groups of people who were also looking for trenches, which they hadn't been able to find either. I've started shouting for him, but the problem is he's actually a bit deaf, so everyone else keeps answering and I go blundering off in the wrong direction. Oh, I'll find him sometime, I suppose. While we stumble around on the promontory, down in the incident room, Henry's got a major find. He thinks he's found the entrance onto the whole site, cutting through the earthwork at the furthest end.
You can see the actual entrance coming through, you can see the outer bank breaking that and coming up into the inner bank. So playing with the geophysics on that. So that's magnetic data. Perhaps more impressively, you can just see the break in it with the big blue line.
If this was the entrance, then digging here could be key to understanding the site.
We have actually started to really get our head around what's going on in here. We do have the back wall coming round there. It is swinging round here. We've got a really well-preserved roundhouse, about 9 metres in diameter.
What do you think that big post hole might be for?
Well, maybe to support something in the roof, but equally, it could be something related to a hearth here. There was the traces of charcoal in the centre here, which is where you'd expect the hearth to be. And of course, we do have at the back here what looks like possibly a gully. So you can imagine that there's this water cascading down the hill. And this ditch is here to deflect the water around the roundhouse.
Well, I don't know about Francis's theory. If I lived here, I'd never leave the house. With drainage ditches to keep it dry and proper stone foundations for the walls, this house was built to last. Although the very fact that people were living up here at all shows how determined they must have been. And having confirmed this roundhouse, now Francis wants to find the allotment next door. So he's extending Trench 2 here. For me, the problem with all this fog today is that I've got no clear picture of the site. I've just been blundering around, stumbling across archaeologists in trenches who are either very depressed or very excited. But what is this place for? How does it work?
Well, for me, the fog's lifted, Tony, because I could never understand why they put all the effort into these huge defences when they were seeming to defend nothing over there.
Sure.
Well, what now is apparent is that that was a major settlement, somewhere very important and somewhere to be proud of. Now, the way into settlements is always the most important part. So that's why I've taken you here. Look, down there.
You think that this is actually the entrance into the whole settlement?
I'm convinced of it, Tony, and I'm very excited because at the bottom there was paving, and that's potentially prehistoric.
Well, maybe, but the burial that was promised yesterday turned out to be a roundhouse. Still, I suppose we'd better give Francis the benefit of the doubt. So at 10:30 on our final day, we're opening a 5th trench here. Back at the earthwork, careful scraping has paid dividends. Ian's discovered that layers of soil were piled up on top of each other, perhaps over centuries, to form one of the banks.
What you seem to have is literally a dump of material on top of this, which is an old ground surface. So this isn't a rampart as such. This is where they've been cleaning the ditch out and they've thrown the material outside to make this bank.
Right, and then to make the purpose of a counterscarp bank is to make even more of an obstacle of the ditch behind it.
Yeah, make the ditch deeper by raising the banks beside it.
Yeah, OK. So, I mean, actually, this is rather good because it does give us evidence that they were strengthening the defences.
Or they were maintaining them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just a one-off event, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. They're coming back several times, year after year, to build this bank up, clean out the ditch, maintain it.
So it's not just a simple one-off event.
No.
No, that's smashing.
We're convinced the earthwork was being strengthened year after year to defend the people living in the village behind it. But who were they? And what were they defending themselves against? Big questions for the last day.
Oh, I've still got some odd bits of flint here.
Back at the roundhouse in Trench 3, we've had another small breakthrough.
God, that's enormous. Just ease that out. Oh, wow.
Oh, look at that.
Even I would recognise that. Isn't that gorgeous?
That's actually a touched-up edge round there, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's handmade.
So that's going to be a scraper. That is the best piece we've had, and that is a real tool.
Yeah.
That's great, but we're still desperate for a date, something a solitary scraper can't give us. We need results over at the entranceway in Trench 4.
This would have been the sort of ceremonial centre of the site. This was the only major entrance into it. And you came from that direction, and then these earthworks focus you around this corner. Everything is designed to focus people around here and into the entranceway.
Tracy, that scatter of stones along there, do you reckon that actually is some kind of roadway?
I don't think there can be any doubt about it now, Tony. It's really nice. You've got these large stones here. They're running along the edge. They seem to form curb line to the edge of this road. And in areas where it's undulating, they've put these smaller stones in. Basically, they formed a really nice, hard, flat platform for a road surface to come through.
Couldn't this just be 17th century or whatever?
No. The only thing we've got from the surface of this so far has been flint flakes, worked flint. I think we've got to be looking at an early date and could well be Bronze Age.
Fantastic. Finally, we're getting close to dating our site, with some time in the Bronze Age, roughly 4,000 years ago, looking most likely. And what an impressive site this entrance must have been. Probably with a guardhouse controlling access to the village beyond.
Now, the thing is, Tony, you'd have walked on this roadway. We don't know how far it extends. And then if you're heading towards the houses over here, you come into the interior, right? Now, if you look up on the left up here, on the skyline, there are some lumps and bumps. Now, I think they could well turn out to be cairns where the ancestors were buried, overlooking the houses and overlooking the gateway.
So you come in through this spectacular entrance with that amazing view behind you. You come up here, the first thing that you see is the ancestors, and beyond it, you've got a view out to the sea.
You've got it.
The sea, perhaps the single biggest clue to what happened on this hill, has been staring us in the face all the time. We know that people in Antrim were exchanging stone tools with communities on the other side. We've found plenty of worked flints in our roundhouses, probably from the mine at the foot of the hill. So could trade across the sea explain who these people were and why they were here?
In the Bronze Age, don't forget that people had already been navigating these waters for thousands of years, and they would have had those skills passed on from father to son.
How would they actually physically know where they were going across these waters?
This isn't rocket science, it's coastal navigation, and it's so fortunate in this area where Scotland is only 15 miles away from Northern Ireland. Most days you can see one headland from another.
I look what they've done, this one here. That is abysmal. Bang, bang, and oh, that'll do. But at the end of the day, you could live with this. And I mean, there they are. They are in the Bronze Age, but they are so totally reliant on flint still.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, you know, there's plenty of it around, that's the thing.
Basically, the quality of flint working declined as flint was replaced by metal. These specimens from across our site are so shabby, we can finally be certain that our roundhouses and the people living in them are Bronze Age. And so is the earthwork, which radiocarbon dating showed was built during the Middle Bronze Age, roughly 4,000 years ago.
If you come up this way, you see you actually start rising on the cliff. Well, the first thing you're seeing are these cliffs themselves. They're hugely dramatic.
Henry's really on form. He's made a further discovery. He's found the pathway that prehistoric people would have followed to reach our site.
As you rise up a bit further, you come around on the edge of the cliffs, following this sort of cliff top path, you come to see our site in profile. Now, at that point, the site is dramatic. And then as you keep on going round, that's where the entrance to the site is, right on that edge. That route gives you a very sort of dramatic, almost processional route to the site.
It's 5 o'clock and our 3-day battle against the elements is over. At times, we've scarcely been able to find our way in all the rain and fog, but considering what we've found, it's been worth it. Because what we do know is that a major Bronze Age community lived up here that until now no one knew it even existed.
Time Team is 100% independent and funded by our incredible fans. Joining Patreon gives you access to exclusive interviews, 3D models, masterclasses, and more. Please join us on this exciting journey. We need more support to make more episodes.
On a bitterly cold night in January 1439, the Grace Dieu was lying silently at anchor, surrounded by 3 smaller royal ships. The story goes that this huge royal battleship was struck by lightning and burnt to the water. Strangely enough, the other ships weren't damaged. Nearly 600 years later, the skeleton of a huge ship is still visible on the bottom of the river. John Adams, who was one of the leading archaeologists on the Mary Rose, has no doubt this is the Grace Dieu.
We're going to put a trench over the stern and look at a part of the structure that we think most information is going to come from in the time available to us.
On a practical note, how the hell are we going to get the dirt out?
Well, we're going to excavate essentially just as you do on land, with trowels, paintbrushes, etc. But we'll suck the spoil away with a water suction dredge, and that has the effect of keeping the visibility a little bit clearer.
Henry V was the most powerful king in Europe after defeating the French at the Battle of Agincourt in 1415. In just one day, the English wiped out most of the French nobility. Even though Agincourt was the last great land battle of the 100 Years' War, the French and their powerful allies, the Genoese, posed a continual threat on the seas with their huge warships called carracks. Henry V kept his royal navy here in the Hamble River. Unlike Southampton, which had been raided several times by the Genoese, the Hamble was a safe anchorage, protected from the invaders by a chain across the river mouth. So we are looking for an enormous ship. She carried a fighting force of at least 200 men, and we think her forward castle, or forecastle, was 50 feet above the waterline. That's 3 times the height of a double-decker bus. But as our experts can't agree about most of the other dimensions, one of our targets is to define her actual size. But why did they build her so big?
It had to be larger than the largest ship the enemies of England could throw against it. And those were the Genoese carracks, the big Mediterranean sailing vessels of the allies of the French. And the Grace Dieu is about 3 times as large as the largest carrack.
We think that at least 17 ships of Henry V's Royal Navy were maintained and overhauled at Bursledon, a mile towards the sea from our site. Stuart would like to know more about this busy village in the time of Henry V. With so much royal business, Bursledon docks must have been a focal point for trade. If Stuart can locate the medieval shoreline, then he can begin to piece together the layout of the ancient port. The tides in the river churn up all sorts of silt and weed, and the underwater visibility is very poor, so John has designed a special enclosure. This paddling pool-looking device is called the sea curtain. Once anchored over the trench, the sides can be let down and secured to form a tank. The water inside can then be pumped out through a filter and returned into the enclosure, clear of silt. Well, that's the theory, but it's already taken half the day just to inflate it and get it in the water. It's just after lunch and the tide is slowing down. John's getting ready to dive.
Chin up just a little bit, mate. Yeah, in. Fingers.
Everything else is ready. Each diver has a companion on standby in case there's a problem.
Contents gauge. Carabiner. Suit inflation. You okay? Get diver in the water, please.
But there's little point in Phil and I taking the place of the 2 working divers until the visibility is far better and they've started to uncover the wreck.
Left surface.
John has chosen to dig across the stern of the ship in a trench about 2 by 2.5 metres. The depth of water at the moment is only 2 metres, but the tide's still running. The visibility is extremely poor, and there's a huge amount to get ready before the serious archaeology can begin. John's still positioning the anchors for the sea curtain. I was rushing around like crazy till just after lunch, and now everything's just gone, ugh. That's really frustrating.
Why?
Well, nothing's happening. Look at this thing. It took them hours to blow this up, and it's just been sitting in the water forever.
Well, look, no, I mean, I disagree with you. I mean, I know it's disappointing. I want to go and see this boat, don't get me wrong. I mean, it looks like at least I've got my feet in the water. But, I mean, look, this is a difficult exercise. A lot of it is experimental. That has never been tried before. So, I mean, we've got to get it out there, we've got to test it, and we can't run it until we've done all this.
The first people to investigate the wreck were the Victorians, who thought the Grace Dieu was a huge Viking ship because her hull was clinker built. This was an ancient technique using horizontal overlapping boards, still used today in small boats. The wreck diggers noticed the old ship's hull was made up of not 1, but 3 planks of oak fastened together with huge ship's nails. Nothing like this had ever been seen before, and not surprisingly, archaeologists since have been asking questions.
232 in the main, all functioning correctly. Ready to hat the diver. You happy, Phil?
I am overjoyed. I can't tell you how long I've waited for this. Good.
It's mid-afternoon on day 2, and Phil's moment has finally come.
You happy?
I am absolutely happy.
Diver 2 ready to enter the water.
But there's a problem. John hasn't been able to secure the sea curtain to the river bed properly, and the water exchange isn't working. So Phil's going to have to take a chance with the visibility. Tony to Phil, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Tony.
What's it like down there?
Like a pea soup, actually.
Can you see anything of the boat?
You've got to bear with me, Tony, because I cannot see a single thing.
What can you feel?
There it is, now that makes sense. And that is, unquestionably, Grace Dieu.
These are really tough conditions even for the most experienced divers. And a scarf joint. One of the main tasks today is to establish the length of the boards that form the clinker hull. Colin McEwen, who's diving with Phil at the moment, is measuring one of the hull planks.
Right, could you just give me a measurement from the scarf joint at the end that's free back to the farthest point away that you can get? Okay. Understood? Yeah, understood.
Topside diver 1.
Topside.
Can you tell John the plank is 2.43 metres long?
This is a new discovery. Everyone thought the ship had been built using boards no longer than 2 metres.
2.43, roger that.
But now the moment has come. As I get closer, I'm trying to imagine all those medieval shipwrights putting her together. Why those mutinous sailors abandoned her. Maybe she wasn't struck by lightning.
Phil to Tony, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Are you as amazed as you should be?
It's really fantastic. When I first got down, the visibility was just like being in a swimming pool. But there's so much of it here, Phil.
I know, it just seems so bizarre. I mean, we two who've actually seen it are giggling and bubbling to us over a couple of idiots.
Phil's absolutely right. You can't possibly tell how big she is until you get down here. Now I can see for myself the massive frame timbers, with the side of the ship disappearing away. The ballast, I assume, as there's no other reason for flints to be in here. And until you see how close together these enormous timbers are that step down towards the stern, you can't appreciate the scale of this ship. The Grâce-Dieu heralded the end of the great clinker ships. By the time Henry VIII launched the Mary Rose nearly 100 years later, the old clinker technology had given way to a radically different carvel design, using parallel boards fixed edge to edge onto a rigid frame. This morning, Francis and Stuart started to look for the medieval shoreline in Bursledon. One of their targets was the remains of a storehouse near the old dried-up creek.
This is the storehouse. We've gone down and we've hit lots of rocks. And I think these are footings for walls or something like that. We don't know what date they are. But next door, right, dug a little hole and came up with this. Now that makes me very excited. It's a bit of pottery dated about 1450. So that is right on the money for the Grâce-Dieu. And then we've also found in that trench a large-headed nail that could be something to do with ships, but we don't know for sure yet.
What does it tell us?
Well, what it tells us is what Bursledon is in the late 15th century. Bursledon seems to be, I think we're right in our original assumptions, between there and just beyond the main road which exists today. So that's the Bursledon of the 16th century with the creek out in front of it.
So if Stuart's right, this dried-up creek just by the church could have been at the heart of medieval Bursledon and the centre of a royal shipbuilding business which would grow and diversify for centuries to come, or at least until the railways came along. Carenza has discovered that the practicalities of building the Grâce-Dieu were astounding. It's a remarkable testament to the courage and ambition of those medieval shipwrights.
I mean, what's really struck me is the sheer quantities of everything that was required to build it. I mean, there's thousands of gallons of tar and pitch are needed to waterproof it, 38 tons of rope for the sails, never mind anything else for the sails. There's 23 tons of iron required to make 52,000 pounds of nails. That's just the nails on the ship.
And that's without the acres of timber that you need to hold together.
I mean, the figures for that are unbelievable, aren't they? 2,735 oak trees, 1,145 beech trees. That doesn't include all the timber that came from abroad.
You're absolutely right. I mean, some of it came from the Baltic. You've got wainscot boards, and you've got Rigols, which are timber from Riga, and you've got Prussian deal, which again is all from the Baltic, coming into the East Coast ports here.
And then there's the fitting out, the anchors. It's got 24 anchors, and the largest one is 17 feet high.
That anchor had a name. It was called Tinctor, and it survives in the royal accounts right up to the time of Henry VII.
Over the 3 days, we've discovered a lot more about the Grâce-Dieu. From the sonar geophysics, we think that she measured about 120 feet long at the keel. And when you take into account the overhanging bow and stern, she was probably longer than 200 feet. And there's no doubt that she was very broad, over 50 feet at the widest point. John's discovered a lot of new technical information, from the length of the hull planking to the sizes and arrangement of the stern timbers. As a ship, we can't say if she was a success or a failure, because through no fault of her own, the Grâce-Dieu was a battleship without a war. There's no doubt that if she'd gone out in anger, she could have overpowered her enemies, but would she have lasted the ravages of the wind and the sea? That we shall never know.
This was always going to be a difficult shoot, what with the untried technology, and the very fast-flowing river, and the bad visibility. And there were times when I thought we weren't going to get anywhere. But actually, we know far more about the Grâce-Dieu than we did 3 days ago. And that's why we came here. The rest of the time team have gone home, but I've got to have just one more look.
Hello, my name's John Gator. Time Team is fan-funded by Patreon. This vital support helps us to make new episodes. Joining Patreon gives you access to exclusive interviews, 3D models and masterclasses, plus lots more.